All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about comments. So, when we're writing code, it's important for us to, um, be able to communicate with other people. Uh, in a typical setting in which you would be writing code, um, usually you're part of a company. You think of all those big, tech companies like, Microsoft or Apple or, Facebook, whatever. Obviously, those are humongous companies with thousands and thousands of people who work there. And so writing code, is not usually a solitary kind of thing, even though for us right now, because we're just learning the basics, we are doing it kind of on our own. But in general terms, you need to be able to write comments with your code so that other people can come along and take a look at it and, know what's going on. So typical scenarios, maybe you have someone on your team, so your team is trying to do something, make an app or something, and you have other people on your team, and you write your part of the code, but they are going to check it and make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, and you're checking theirs too. They call that peer review. Another scenario, this one is maybe even more common. Well, no, it's not more common, but it is very common, which is that, you write some code and, it's really cool, does some interesting stuff, but you don't necessarily, using those same, you're not working on this same piece of code all the time. And so, something changes somewhere and you have to come along, 1 year later, 2 years later, and kind of take a look at your code and see if something has to be changed. But even though you wrote that code yourself, because it was like 2 years ago and you've written millions of lines of code since then, you can't remember what that stuff does. So writing comments and documentation is important for those reasons. Okay, so in Python, we denote a comment with hashtag. Okay, so in my case, it turns things green. And so now I can write whatever I want, and Python is going to basically ignore everything after that. But when I write actual code, x equals input, you can see that it is different colors, all that stuff. But if I put in front of this line, if I put the hashtag, that turns it green. In yours, it might be different color or whatever. But it means that the computer is going to ignore that stuff. Okay, so when do we need a comment? Well, typically in a file, you probably want to make a comment of the name of this file. So this is groundwork 6a.py. And this is author is by me, Mr. Wu. And, created on such and such a date, August 7th, whatever it is. Okay, so that's some of the kind of, just kind of when you write an assignment or something for your English class, this is similar to the kind of stuff that you're writing there, right? Like, okay, whose is it, and the date, and whatever, right? So in a file, we should have stuff like that. Other kind of stuff that we should have. Typically, I will write a comment if I'm starting a new loop. So at the beginning of a while loop, I can say, okay, this is a code. Let's do a while loop. Okay, so while true, and say this is, plays the game. And so this is, what kind of while loop is this? This is while you can write a comment saying game loop is something that we typically write for things like this. Do you need a Do you need a comment if we're writing an if statement? I would say depends. Hopefully not. If you've done things in a sensible way, you may not need a comment here. But yeah, let's just say I have like a code like this: x equals 4. Where did x come from? Say it came from this input. How many fridges do you have in your restaurant? Okay, and if x equals 4, you can print that's too many fridges. So I have a piece of code like this, and that's fine. Could I write a comment saying, like, okay, here I am. I will ask the user how many fridges she has, and if it's more than 4, say it's too many. So I could write a comment like this, which kind of briefly tells what's happening. But in all honesty, looking at the code, it's fairly easy for me to figure that out. And it would be even easier if I used a variable name that's not x, and if I used a variable name that's like fridges. Then it's super obvious what is happening, right? Or even if I have, say, number of fridges. Number of fridges. So if I am naming my variables properly, I don't actually need that much comments. It takes me longer to read this comment than it takes for me to look at this code and see what is happening. So you can avoid writing a lot of comments by just naming your variables properly. When you're writing comments, you assume that the person who is reading this stuff does know how to code already. Like I said, it's either you 1 year in the future, or maybe it's a colleague of yours who obviously has the same kind of skill set that you do. So don't over comment. If you have a comment for one comment for every 2 or 3 lines of code, I would say that's probably too much. One comment for maybe every, I don't know, 10 lines is more like it. It depends how your code is structured. Like I said, beginning of loops, I will often put a comment unless it's like quite obvious. The kind of code that we are writing right now, we're a couple weeks into, you learning how to code. Because we're still quite new at coding, the things that we are doing are quite simple compared to what we will be doing, by the end of the course. And so, for most of the stuff that we have done so far, not much comment is required. Exception, I would say, like I mentioned before, the stuff kind of at the top like that, and also the at the beginning of a loop, as I mentioned. One word about variable names. So you see that when I made this variable name, number fridges, okay, I could have gone a few different ways. We could go number fridges, all one word, but that is kind of hard to read. Some people go number fridges, capitalize the second word, lowercase the first word. That is okay. It's not my preferred, but there are people who do that. You could go number underscore of underscore fridges, but then that gets kind of hard to read because you have this word in the middle that basically it doesn't really have much meaning. It's not necessary for it to be there. The goal when you're making a variable name is to make the variable name both useful and short. So it has to be meaningful and tell us some information, but the longer the variable name is, the harder it is to read. The goal is to have code that is easy to read. And so number fridges does the job there just fine. We use underscore instead of like a dash or some other punctuation just because that's the convention. And we generally use lowercase, again, just out of convention. Okay, so I think that's it for documentation. You can start documenting your code that you write. Um, see how it goes. I'll tell you if it seems like too many, or you can always ask me. I'll always tell you. Commenting is useful not only for putting comments, but it's also useful for monkeying around with our code. So oftentimes you will have a line of code which you're not sure if it works or not, or maybe you're trying to test something, and say, I don't know, say we had another print statement here. So what you can do is temporarily put a comment there, and so that part of the code is not going to run, but it's still there. You haven't deleted it. You just commented it out because you're trying to test something, and so you can just comment it, and so that part isn't going to run. And then when you want to bring it back, you just delete the comment. In fact, this is such a common occurrence that there is actually shortcuts to do this. So if you want to comment out a whole bunch of lines at once like this, you just select it. In Python, if you go to edit, you will see a few commenting shortcuts here. So toggle comment is Control 3, comment out is Alt 3, uncomment Alt 4. Okay, so if I want to go Control 3, okay, then those things are all commented, and I can toggle it. I go Control 3 again, and those ones disappear. Alt 3 I think is going to do the same thing. Alt 3, and then I can Alt 4 to uncomment. Okay, so those shortcuts are there if you happen to use that function a lot, which a lot of people do. I would say most coders use that quite a bit. All right, now this lesson is really over for real. See you in the next one.